Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are, what time you are listening to this. My name is Winston, and this is Conversation with Marketers. Today, I have a very special guest. I'm very excited about this conversation, Ryan Paul Gibson. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
Awesome. All about that Adidas.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always worried about wearing these things. I'm like, should I wear a logo? Do I look like I'm repping the brand? But I don't know. I was feeling it today, so I put it on.
It's fine. It's a good look, and blue is my favorite color, so it's all
Cool.
good.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's a good look on you. So just to tell you guys a bit about Ryan's background before we actually get started. So he started out in TV and radio as a reporter, and transitioned, has held several positions, marketing positions, including marketing manager, senior marketing strategist, and today he is the senior marketing specialist at Rewind and also CEO of Content Lift, which helps B2B businesses build a better business through investigative customer interviews, which I'm actually very interested to learn more about what that term means. That's a very interesting term. I've never heard that before. So Ryan, before we get right into it, I always allow my guests just to share their background, like how did you get into marketing? Your story, your journey, career
Yeah.
path, and that led to where you are today.
Well, yeah, and thank you for having me on and talking about this. So you mentioned the reporter thing, which is true, but I actually started in marketing even before that. I was a reporter like halfway through. When I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a marketer anymore. But where I started was actually B2C food service retail. And that was like a long time ago. We're talking over 20 years ago. So I worked in the operations side of things, and I worked for the company It was a chain of coffee shops in Canada. And we had about 100 locations, over 100 locations across the country. I did a lot of the training, store setup, things like that. And then after I'd worked in the industry a little bit at different places, and I go and got my commerce degree, they needed a director of operations that wore the marketing hat. And I was okay at the operations side of thing, but I really liked the marketing. I'd never really got to do a lot of that. And one of the things about consumer goods is they're very research heavy. They do a ton of it. They always have. But it's super expensive, especially back 20 years ago. This is because I was working there's before Google Analytics was a thing or any of the tools we have now. So I actually had to go and do my own research. And the type of research that I did was all customer interviews. So I did observational work. I'd be in the stores. I'd even go into the lines of competitors and start talking to their customers. They had no idea who I was. It was all sort of incognito, but I just need to understand how and why they're making decisions about us versus the competitors. And that's always been my go-to really throughout my career. So then that ran its course. I wasn't sure if I was going to work in business, in business anymore. So I went back to school to broadcasting, and that's when I became the reporter. And that's when I got a whole series of different skills revolving around how you talk to people, how do you extract information in a way that's unbiased, creates a statement of fact, and a timeline of events, right? And what was pushing those events forward. Such a huge skill to have. And I just took those things and I just brought them in my career going forward as a marketer. So to what you said, I've worked as a senior marketer, mostly in content, positioning, branding, and strategy throughout my career. Still am today.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't even know about
that was a long answer to your question. Sorry.
No, I actually thought it was more. I don't know why I thought there would have been more.
I totally ran through the marketing side of things, but I mean, like, if you want to talk about like why I do what I do, customer research, it's always been my go-to, right? It's so easy. Let me give you an example. So when I went back and started working as a marketer, I had never actually heard of Salesforce. This is 2010. That sounds crazy when you think about it now, but I had no idea that existed because I'd been out of the game and I was in a different world. Like when I started in B2B marketing, the fax machine was like my lead gen. So like that's how much of a
showing your
dinosaur.
age there, Ryan.
I know, I'm a dinosaur. So I'm like, what is this Salesforce? What is this HubSpot? And I think I did that thing, which I think you see a lot of now, where I over-indexed into technology, where I thought I was going to solve all the problems, all the stuff I didn't know back then. Now I'll magically know, and I'm going to figure out marketing better than I ever have before. Now, it did help. All those things do help. You know, all the tech stack and all the attribution that we debate on LinkedIn and Twitter all day long. But I feel this is the hill I will die on in marketing. I don't think you can really put together a full-fledged marketing strategy without understanding why and how buyers are making decisions about your product in the context of how they do things. Because if you don't know that, you're really going to struggle, one, to make an impact, and two, you're probably going to waste a lot of money in your marketing, right? And you're definitely going to not make the sales team any happier, any richer, because they're going to probably do all those things that we talk about, which you don't like, where they go buy lists and they start prospecting because they're just trying to survive. Like they have quotas, they need to hit them. So if you don't understand that qualitative part of the buying journey, all the data that you have in your CRM and tech stack is just a fraction of what you need to know to make a good strategy. There we go. Is that a better answer for you? And that's what I did. So I just leaned on that my whole career. I went out and talked to the customers every chance I could get.
There's so much I want to impact from that answer that you just gave. The first one being in terms of that tech stack, because rightly as you say, we see now where marketers have an over reliance on technology. Thinking that once they have the right tech stack, then you're going to be, like rock stars when it comes on to marketing. Do you believe that tech stack, not necessarily in the context of customer interviews, but just in general, do you think marketers, is it more of an hindrance, do you believe, or more of a help, just based on how we understand the environment to be today? Do you think that it helps marketers more than it hurts them, or is it the other way around?
I think it actually hurts more than helps, to be honest, which probably, we get seduced by the things that we see in front of us. Like, let me give an example. So I'm in a few Slack groups and I see people just dropping tools in left, right, and center. You have a tool that can do this. You have a tool that does that. Maybe the tool is not the problem. Maybe there's an underlying diagnosis you have not made that is actually the root of the issue. Now, tools still can help, right? But I think I've heard a lot of marketers that I respect online that have been doing this, longer than me and have been way more successful than me. You need to get a tool when everything is broken, really, to a point where the things you've cobbled together aren't working and you can't scale anymore. A tool shouldn't solve a problem. It should just allow you to get from A to B faster.
Right.
That makes sense.
Right.
It should supplement something that's already working.
Yeah.
It's not a solve, it's a support. So for me in my business, I'm very lean in what I do, and the tech I use, if I use maybe 2 or 3 tools, because what I want to do is make sure I'm not spending money on a thing that I just have to do more work in managing, right? What the tool is actually helping me get revenue through the door, right? I hope that makes sense, but you get seduced by these things, right? Because it's easy to think that a tool is going to solve your problem.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Because I'm the same way as well. I think probably the only, I guess you could call it, popular tech tool that I use is HubSpot. I mean, I haven't even taken the time to look at Salesforce. I mean, even though I've heard demand gen marketers say that, it's a good integration where HubSpot handles more the marketing funnel side, and then you have Salesforce for qualified leads to more handle the sales funnel side. I'm like, listen, HubSpot works for me. Like, I can do all the managing of the pipeline in HubSpot. So I'm just, not too big on that. But you mentioned that in terms of that customer research and, sales not having to go there and do that research themselves. one of the big things I'm about now is marketing and sales alignment. So in the context of customer research, how do you
Yeah.
think marketers actually executing on that can make sales job a lot easier? Like probably even if you have some examples of how you've done so in the past where research has helped the sales team.
Yeah, I mean, the sales team, when you have a sales conversation, right? It's in a certain context, and depending on the stage of where a company is, the sales team is going to do different levels of discovery. So if I'm an early stage company, and I have something that's sales led, sales cycles are long, the actual contract value is very high. The sales team is probably going to be doing a lot of those probing questions, right?
All right.
But if they do their job right, they're going to get to a certain stage where they won't be able to do a lot of the discovery more because they're really just trying to close deals, and that's what they should be focused on. The challenge is now, if you look at most B2B, like Gartner had a really good report, I think, a few weeks ago, where most B2B buyers today, they are at a certain level of affinity before they hit your website. So they probably already know whether you're at they've shortlisted you or they actually want to buy you.
Right.
So a salesperson then has to be ready to have the conversation in that context. If they start probing all these discovery questions about the pains and, well, what are you trying to solve? You should know that already, right? And you should be, if the customer's coming in, it sounds like you have to understand what I do. Already there's a breakdown. I've done tons of customer interviews where I've heard prospects say, I love their sales team because I felt like they understood everything from the get-go. I didn't have to explain it to them. They knew me. So I'm going to answer your question. So how does this work? So every time I do a customer research project, what I'm trying to understand is what's everything that's going on in their life way before they even know I even exist. So, because most people don't wake up and say they want to solve a problem today. It's a buildup of things over time, right?
Right.
I've talked to customers where they've been problem aware, but haven't bought a solution until 3 years down the line. Why? If they know the problem exists, why did they wait 3 years? That's a really important thing to understand, because maybe that wasn't a priority yet. Maybe they didn't have the budget. Maybe the company wasn't a certain scale. Whatever. So me as a marketer, I want to understand how they're thinking, so then I can influence that thinking. So when they get to the point of either being problem aware or I've influenced them in becoming problem aware, when they get to the sales team for some type of demonstration or self-install tour thing, and it's like an SDR coming in and helping, or whatever your framework is for moving someone through a funnel and through a buying journey, I want to have them understand that we are the ones that are going to help them get from A to B, because that way the sales team can just focus on all the things they need to focus on, which is onboarding or terms of the deal or legal things or whatever, right? That's what they need. They can't be doing the job of a marketer, during that process. They need to be doing the job of a salesperson.
Right.
That's how I look at these things. So that's how research influences all those things. And it goes into sales enablement, stories that sell, battle cards, your landing pages, all those things to build affinity and build education. So by the time they get to you, they're like, yeah, you were in our consideration set and you were like number one on our list.
Yeah, and that's true. I think the biggest takeaway I'm hearing here is in terms of that sales collateral, sales enablement content, that can help increase the velocity in terms of that time to close of these deals. Because if the sales team is already aware of what the prospect struggles with even before getting on that call, then it makes it a lot easier. Because I've had conversations, as a matter of fact, one of the biggest struggle that whether it's the CEO or CMO I've spoken to locally where I'm in Jamaica, they're always saying that the biggest problem they have with agencies here is they don't take the time to really understand their business and their customers and what problem they're trying to solve. So I definitely see how that could be a benefit. but kind of a segue into another question. When you're actually conducting those customer research, because you spoke about overcoming bias, how do you ensure that that doesn't happen? Because I mean, even this morning, I saw a post by Josh Brown where he was talking about leading questions, right?
Yeah,
I see
Josh is
smile, which
great.
means
He
you saw
knows
the
his
post as
stuff.
well.
Yeah, Josh is awesome. He's really good.
Yeah, and sales question. Sorry, not sales question. Leading questions like, how do you know that you're not closing at 20? I mean, I'm paraphrasing. I have absolutely no clue because I can't remember the phrase right now. But
That's
basically,
okay.
the question I'm trying to get to is, how do you overcome that bias and not ask leading questions? Like, what's the best practice to conduct customer interviews?
So there's a few things that I like to walk people through. The first is and have an objective, because a half hour, let's say it's a half hour conversation, right? Some people would say 15 minutes, some people say talk for 45. The length of time to me is almost irrelevant. It's what is the purpose of the conversation?
Right.
And let me give you an example. So I'm working with a company now. There was two pains they wanted to sort of figure out, or two issues they wanted to try to get at. One was, are we building the right products? And is our product giving the right experience? The second one was, we want to understand how we get more referrals. Those are two different things, actually, when you think about it, because one is, what is it my experience as the customer using this product? Did it meet my expectations? Did it solve my jobs be done? If we're going to use that methodology language, and people can Google that and understand what that means if they're not familiar. Versus, okay, how does someone actually refer this product and why? And what is the sales cycle and buying journey for these things? Those are two different conversations. You can really soak up 30 minutes very fast. If you try to have both those conversations with one prospect, you're going to get diluted answers, and you're not going to get the data you need that are really going to help you make better decisions. So that's the first one. Have an objective. Second is exactly sort of what you talked about with Josh. There's a certain way to conduct these things. And how I approach it is make sure you have the same structure every single time, and you ask questions. You're getting to a statement of fact rather than trying to support my thesis. So what I mean by that is I'm just trying to prove or disprove a theory. I'm not trying to confirm or make myself look good or show the executive, see, I was right. If I'm wrong, that's good, because then now we're not going to waste money on something. I'd rather be wrong and find a new solution than try and figure out if I'm right. That's just a horrible waste of time. Things like asking leading questions. You can't say, and how good was that? It's a horrible question, because you're priming the pump. You should just be, walk me through your experience of this product.
Right.
Like, those are the things that I like to talk about. It takes practice, right? This is not something that everyone's naturally good at. I've interviewed now about 1,500 people in my life. I'm still getting better at it, but those are some of the things I would say is to follow to conduct an interview. Well, actually, last one I'll say is don't ask. There's this thing about asking why, why questions are actually really good questions, but asking why is actually a combative way to interview someone. So if someone says to you, gives you like a very vague statement such as, yeah, it really, nothing I saw out there wowed me. Oh, why is that? Well, that's actually a combative statement. You can say, that's interesting. Walk me through your thinking there, and just shut up and let them talk. That's another one too. Just shut up a lot, which sounds great. Like you're doing now, right? You're just letting me go on and on and on, because when you allow people to voice their opinion and voice how they're thinking and feeling and create a safe space for that, it's amazing what they'll say to you. Mm-hmm. So those are the things I would say to people about how to conduct an interview to reduce and minimize bias.
All right, that's actually great. I actually just pick up a nugget there from you, because I like to ask why. So it didn't even occur to me until you said it.
Yeah.
I'm like, huh. He is right. That does sound a bit like confrontational. Well, not directly confrontational, but it
Yeah.
sounds like you're pushing back on their response.
Or you're judging them, right?
Right.
So why is a great question. And there's, I think, even a book about the power of why, I believe it's called. Because understanding someone's why is a very valuable thing. But constantly asking someone that question in a
Right.
half-hour interview, why? Well, why? Well, why? Well, why? I'm like, dude, chill. So it's, oh, that's really so interesting. Can you expand on that for a second? Can you
Yeah.
walk me through that? Actually, and the last one, I forgot one. The last one I'll say is people do this a lot. I still do this. I struggle with it. We ask two questions at once.
Hmm.
So one would be, tell me about the first time you used the product, and then who did you talk to right after? Sounds innocuous, but the
Yeah,
thing is
I'm
now,
guilty.
yeah, now I'm thinking of two different answers.
Right.
And what happens is you get half answers instead of full answers. So it really comes down to, walk me through the first time you used the product. Really, that's interesting. Who did you talk to after you used it?
Yeah.
Small little things like that, and really just practice. Best way to do it.
Some great nuggets here. All right, Ryan. So you also mentioned about, and this is very interesting. I didn't even think about it until you mentioned it just now. That in B2C that they have what's the term they call us? Something out of shoppers. I can't remember the term right now.
Secret shoppers?
Right. Of course, secret shoppers.
Yeah.
How would you translate that in the context of B2B? It's not like you can just walk into a line somewhere and you have a bunch of B2B buyers of your competitor's product and you're asking questions, say, hey, so why are you here today?
Yeah.
How would you translate that for B2C?
Yeah,
B2B, sorry.
yeah, that's tough, right? I get that one a lot too, because people want to some people want to talk to people who aren't their customers. Product managers are really live in this world, right? Especially when they're trying to validate something,
Right.
trying to build a new thing. They want to go and talk to users. So I think there's a few ways to do this. One is, if you have a good network on LinkedIn or Twitter, which you have a good presence there, you can reach out to people that you have dialogue with or that are in your network, and either they will talk to you if they fit, or they will know someone. Easy first step. Because really, if you're trying to validate a hypothesis in a qualitative environment, you don't need that many conversations if you have a really good research, fine-tuned research objective. If I have one hypothesis statement that says, I think X is this, or I believe X to be this, you can probably get away with just talking to 8 to 12 people, because you'll see patterns and themes start to emerge as you sort of take the work and go through it again, or take the answers. So you can start with the people that you know. The few other places that you can go are private Slack groups or Discord groups, Facebook groups. I'm in a few with other marketers. I'm in RevGenius as well. There's a lot of people in RevGenius. You can start there, put some feelers out, see if people want to talk to you there. And then now there's also companies that have built panels of different roles and responsibilities and titles within B2B. There's user testing, user groups. Winter is another one that sort of popped up, and you can go out and talk to people that fit a certain persona or a certain criteria list, because you're saying, and you can pay to get access to these people. Those are 3 ways you can do it. And you probably don't need much more than that, to be honest, Winston, because you can get, like I said, you get a group of 8 to 12 people. That's a good start to get some good qualitative research to either prove or disprove a hypothesis.
In terms of research, we have only mentioned about customer interviews. Are there other ways that you conduct customer research outside of just interviews, whether qualitative or quantitative methods?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do them as much anymore because my niche really is customer interviews. But you do need to do them because, like I said, it's part of a framework, right? A customer, I wrote about this actually a few weeks ago on LinkedIn, where interviews are not a silver bullet. And there's a lot of talk these days, I find, and maybe it's just me because I'm biased to look for people who talk about it, right? So because that's what I do, and that's sort of my superpower. So I feel like there's an increased conversation online about the importance of getting qualitative one-on-one customer interviews. Great, but it's just a piece of the overall puzzle. You still have to go and get quantitative data. All that tech stack stuff I talked about that I sort of poo-pooed on a few 20 minutes ago. You still have to do that stuff. It's just you can't over-index on either one.
Yeah.
They work together. They're symbiotic. So just today it was I sent someone with Rewind, or I'm working as a senior marketing specialist. I sent someone a survey we did on the e-commerce vertical about a year and a half to 2 years ago, because the data is still relevant, right? And a lot of it was figuring out who these people are, what they care about, getting statistical relevancy for certain questions, open-ended questions and surveys, because that's a great way to really quickly glean through an issue. So surveys are still great. NPS scores, people do them; those are still good, right? All those things matter, but you just can't just do one. You have to have a mosaic of things. So I'm a big fan of surveys. I still do them, because they give you things that you might not necessarily get in one-on-one interviews.
Right. And the reason why I asked is because in the realm of SEO, keyword research is the end all be all. To this day, and I've been following SEO since probably 2010, when Neil Patel, I was really following Neil Patel back then when I wanted to learn more about SEO.
Mm-hmm.
And from that time until today, I haven't come across an SEO specialist who mentions other way of conducting research, whether it's customer interviews or surveys. It's like, oh, you just go on Ahrefs or SEM Rush and you do your keyword research, Google Trends, and that's it. You're good. And I always say the reason why I love customer interviews so much, and definitely why I want to have this conversation with you, is that I always say, Google, a keyword research can tell you what people search for, but customer interviews tells people why they search for what they search for, which, you definitely need both.
Oh, absolutely.
To actually execute on this. So I guess segueing into the next question, which is, how can you convince people that are, lean to one particular bias, in this case, whether it's keyword or whatever the case is, to really get on board with customer interviews?
Let me give you a real life example that would just happen today. So, but I'll start with the SEO one first, because what's interesting is I agree with you. You can find SEO keywords that you didn't know you could actually hitch your wagon to until you actually go start talking to customers about issues they're facing.
Right.
And you get themes on them. So, for example, Rewind, just an example, Rewind does backup and recovery software for cloud, for SaaS products. It's a whole thing. Like it's actually a really cool product. And one of our biggest SaaS products we support is GitHub, which is the largest code repository base on the planet. So when we talked to people, we did the interviews a few months ago. I did them with the product marketing manager. And a few things really interesting came up. From an SEO lens, there was actually a keyword phrase that we had no idea that was an opportunity until we started going through the research, and like, this has come up like 6 times. And then I looked at the volume. It's not high, but that's not the point.
Right.
The point is It was high intent.
Right.
Right? It might only be 30 people a month, but guess what? The conversion for those people, based on me now understanding the journey, because what happened, the term was called backup script. Because what was happening with GitHub is people were trying to write their own code because coders think they can just build everything, which is true. They can build all sorts of cool stuff, but is that worth their time? In this case, what they found was they build the thing. You're like, oh, there's a lot of work and it doesn't work how I want. Might as well just buy Rewind now. So now, now that I understand that's a huge pain point in the journey,
mm-hmm.
and no one is bidding on it, and no one's written any really good content around it, I can own that now. And even though it's low search, it's high intent. So the odds of that turning into a sale for the right persona are high. And what's really interesting now is we just did a review of all the ads we ran. We ran ads in Reddit. We ran ads on Google Display, in some trade areas. So like magazines that focus on like DevOps and IT managers and site reliability engineers. And what's so fascinating is the two pain points or the job they had to do that came out in their research. When we sort of put that into the headlines or the ads, those are the ads that are the highest click-through rate. That's it right there, right? So, I mean, we still have some work to do in verifying whether we're on the right path, but we wouldn't have gotten to this point without having talked to those customers. I wouldn't have understood those were the terms. I wouldn't have understood the language I had to use. And to your point, you know, why are they using those? Why are they looking at those things in the first place in the context of how they do their job? That's why I love this stuff. Like it changes the game fundamentally.
Yeah, and as you were speaking, it just reminded me of a client I worked with. We're still in 2021. I had to check. Earlier this year, and it was the same thing. It's a winter clothing brand out of Canada, and that's the exact same thing. Well, I think I started from the keyword research side, and a lot of the conversations that were happening online was about their customers, but you know they didn't really have much keywords on a particular phrase, which is animal-free jackets.
Okay.
So you know, having spoken with them in terms of those customer interviews, I looked at what was the highest to lowest in terms of the top 5 reasons why they bought, and animal free was at the top of the list because their biggest competitor, and probably the biggest, I would say the market leader, the category leader in that market, their products aren't animal free.
Interesting.
So just from that small nugget of combining the two that you just walked us through, we were able to identify, well, what if we lean heavily on this as to, because our customers are saying the number one reason they purchased from you guys was because your products are animal free versus the other brand, which is considered a premium brand. But, people are starting to move away from that in terms of those animal products, made with animal skin, whatever the case may be. So that was very interesting as well. So some very useful insights that I can definitely attest to what you just walked through there.
Marketing is all about trying to get attention and then influencing people's decisions. So, I mean, like, if you can't, you're not going to know that sitting behind a laptop. Like, it just doesn't work that way. You'll probably glean into it. You might stumble into it by accident. Awesome. But as B2B, especially B2B gets more complex, the markets get more saturated. Like, how many email, you see it all the time on LinkedIn, like how many email software things are there? Like 50, 100 now? And why me? Why you? So we can see some are niching into the creator categories. Some are just focusing on feature sets. I think it was Chili Piper. I was watching a podcast with one of their executives yesterday, and they basically they can be in a one feature set that they know Salesforce, other people are not going to build. Like, and that's it. So, I mean, you can't, those are guesses you can't make in isolation without actually going and understanding people's behaviors. And heat maps and, surveys and analytics and all those things are great. And they're going to help influence the overall strategic direction, like where you throw the dart.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, these are human beings using this stuff. And you need to understand the whys and the hows. Because if you can't figure that out, all the other stuff is for naught.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned email platforms and you mentioned Creator, because as you started speaking, I remember ConvertKit. Like the first email platform that I actually paid money for was ConvertKit, even though MailChimp was free.
Yeah.
And the reason why ConvertKit caught my attention is because back then I had just launched my first blog in terms of paid for the domain name, and I was looking for an email platform to really build my subscribership. And what stood out to me with ConvertKit was the fact that, well, back then, they kind of expanded the niche now to say creator, but back then they were just saying we're the email platform for bloggers. So if you're a blogger, then, you're for us. But a keyword research wouldn't necessarily have told them why is it that I, decided to go with them as opposed to a MailChimp, which is free, because I wasn't going online searching for email platform for bloggers. I just happened to be in a group and, someone mentioned it. Some influencer that I follow happened to mention it. I decided to click on it. So they wouldn't have even gotten that insight if they didn't necessarily. I'm just speaking hypothetically. It's not like they reached out to me and and asked me these questions, but I'm just giving in context in terms of why customer interviews are so important. They wouldn't have gotten that insight because probably Google Analytics would have attributed that sale to direct traffic.
Always does, because Google's just a highway. Like it's the shopping mall now, right? Like that's just the default of where you go. So everything is over indexed to Google. Let me give you another example. So I'm working with an enterprise accounting software, and I did a whole thing of sales enablement for them, interviewing their customers, and so on. There is a CFO at they have a big presence in healthcare, and there's a CFO at a hospital in, I think it was either California or somewhere else on the West Coast. When I talk to this person, they do private demos of this accounting software on their own time to their peers. Not just, hey, what are you using these days? It's, hey, what do you, and then they send you a link. Hey, what are you using these days? Oh, hey, you got time for a coffee? I'll meet you at the shop and I'll show you how it works. The sales team had no idea that this was happening. They had no clue until I went out and found and figured it out. So now I'm like, there's not only your subject matter expert and your eternal champion, you could maybe have this person do demos for you.
Right.
Imagine if you had your peer as the one in the video or whatever doing demos of things, and think about the credibility that's there, right? So I mean, you, and again, just to your point, I wouldn't have known that had I not picked up the phone or opened up Zoom and talked to this person. That you'll get all these interesting nuggets about how what's happening out there and things you can use in your marketing and in your sales, or just in how you make decisions about the company.
The last thing I definitely want to ask you is, I mean, you touched on it, but in terms of your process, probably you have a process, a framework of how to actually conduct customer interviews, not just necessarily what questions to ask, but what's your step-by-step process that you typically use.
So the first thing I do is I meet with a client, if it's me doing it or if I'm just support, and then we figured, okay, what do you want to know? What are the gaps in your knowledge and what's important to understand going forward? And everyone's going to have their own hot take on what that should be and what the priority should be. But, with the Rewind, for example, the reason we did the GitHub research was they had acquired a company that built this backup solution for GitHub, and just things weren't tracking for a certain reason. We weren't getting the lift because it was a startup team of 3 developers. They built the thing and they launched it into the world, but they didn't have a lot of sales and marketing rigor. So in theory, when you bring the new product into the machine, it should lift in sales and marketing, but it wasn't. It wasn't tracking where we thought MRR was going to be. So we're like, okay, this is probably a good scenario to go and talk to the customers and figure out what's going on. And why are they hitting the wall? Why are they churning, or why are they bouncing when they get to the landing page, or what have you? So have an objective. The second process I have is you have to identify which customers. And again, it all depends on where you are and what you want to know. For me, the ideal is find the people who came through your buying journey the fastest, the most recent, and were how do I say this? You convinced the easiest, right? It sounds sort of benign when I say it that way, but you understand like everything that they got, you got right and pushed them through. Because if one deal closed in say half the time over your average deals, I want to understand what happened there, and what can I learn that I can leverage in my own marketing and sales. So I get to find the right people. Then it's really a matter of doing the interviews, which we talked about, and questions or ask questions. I actually, a lot of times I don't have questions to ask anymore other than a guide. What I actually do is I write objectives of the research down. And then what I'll go back and it's like, did I actually hit the objectives? There's some people that say you don't even need to ask a question. You can just sort of say, tell me about the first time you thought about solving X problem with an investment or buying a solution. What was happening in the business? And let's find every step in between, right? All the way up to the sale. And that's your sort of statement of accounts, statement of facts of the entire journey in its entirety. So I get that. And then I really transcribe everything. I go in and reread them again and listen again. And I start bucketing and codifying everything. And they get bucketed into different things. So I mentioned Jobs Be Done. That's for those not familiar, it's an innovation framework started by Clayton Christensen in the 90s. He borrowed some stuff from the 50s, like some concepts. And it's really just people are trying to get from A to B when they buy a thing. They don't necessarily care about the product itself. They care about the transition that the product gives you. So I'm trying to understand like what's happening in that transition and where were they and where are they now? Like what did this product allow them to do?
Right.
And there's stages within that Jobs Be Done research. And there's, it basically boils down to is first something called first thoughts or business triggers, right? So what is actually the thing that was the catalyst for them to say, oh, this sucks. I don't like doing this anymore and I need to solve this problem. The second one is research. How did they go? Like, what did they do? Where was everywhere they went? And what did they look at? Now, some people bucket this into passive search, which is you in that example you gave with the group where someone just sort of mentioned, hey, here's an email thing. And then you start thinking about it for a while. Or active search, where I'm actually shortlisting solutions for me to evaluate further. I sort of just put them all together in a first pass because I still want to understand the journey, because sometimes those journeys are short or long based on the product. And then the evaluation after the shortlist, like was there a buying committee? Who did they talk to? What was the timeline here? And that's the other thing. I'm trying to get the timeline. And then I talk about budgets. Like, what is this budget coming? Where's this money coming from? What budget? Who decides it? Do you have a discretionary budget? Or what did you not get to buy because of this in the fiscal year? What did this take the place of?
Right.
Things like that. Because you need to understand, am I competing against, what kind of a budget am I competing against? Now, this will be different in every company, but it gives you a sense of their thinking. And that's a good one for sales to understand. And then I actually pull out things just for like keyword research, content ideas, all the good marketing stuff. And I just group that all out. And then I put it all together into some type of report. And that's my process. Sounds, I guess, not simple, but that's a lot of work, right? And that's one of the reasons why people don't necessarily do it. And I've talked to CMOs and VPs of marketing. They say that verbatim. We don't do it because of the lift. It's a ton of work, right? And it's just easier to buy ads, A/B test, right?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I've heard or should I say have someone say that to me as well. It was a VP of marketing, and this person said, because I was she asked me, I don't remember how the conversation came up, but we're talking about customer interviews, and I told her, well, customer interviews is like my number one way to gather insights. And she's like, yeah, I don't know, that takes too much time. I'd rather just do it the shortcut way. And I'm like, okay, but you could benefit so much by just talking to the customers. Yeah, the process of doing it may take longer, but it will save you a lot of time, money, and resources later on when, if you can actually figure out a starting point. Let's say you're even conducting A/B experiments, testing.
Yep.
At least you have a starting point to say, all right, we're going to start testing from here based on that customer research, versus you're just randomly doing A/B tests without really understanding the context of what you're trying to find and understand and learn what works better.
Yeah, the way I frame that is, well, then you're probably just going to waste your money. Because then you're talking an executive's language, right? You're wasting budget, you're wasting time, right? Your competitors are going to catch up on you depending where you sit. I did this exact framework for a company here in Ottawa, and they realized they were basically wasting a third of their marketing budget talking about things that didn't matter and didn't resonate with the customers. Now, it resonated with like a small subset, but it didn't resonate with their ideal customer profile, their ICP.
Right.
So I just said, the case, keep doing that if you want, but and here was the crazier part. So that customer segment that they thought was a good one, they also were they had the highest rate of churn. So here they are spending a ton of money to attract a customer that has like super high rates of churn. You say that to an executive and they're like, oh, okay. So yeah. I've just reduced my runway by a month, right? From my Series A or whatever, right? That's how I try to frame the conversation now. Now, you're not going to, again, it's not going to be a magic wand right away. It's right. Marketing still because you have to take all these ideas and then implement them, put them out in the market, test them, see what's going to rise to the top, retweak. But if you didn't have all those things you just talked about, where it's like, I want to go and research the customer so I can make better informed decisions. Yeah, you're just guessing.
Yeah.
And guessing is the easiest way to fail.
Yeah. One last follow-up question to what you just said. How did you in that specific example quantify that they were wasting a third of the budget? Because that I believe would be very valuable in terms of how to quantify that waste.
Yeah, we just looked at the ads, how much time they were spending in social. Right. So it was a bit of an educated guess. Right. But you look at their ad spend with all the messaging and targeting. And then when we talk to their content team, this type of, marketing message, this type of brand message, this type of whatever product positioning, I'm putting this stuff out twice a week and it doesn't really get any engagement. So we just sort of did some napkin math, as they call it, right? And we said, my marketing budget's this. We put some numbers around it. Because that's really all you need to do. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be down to the penny. Whether you're wasting $10,000 or $100,000, you're still wasting it.
Right.
So I, as a marketer, I don't want to spend money on things that aren't going to get me into the market faster and position me as someone who's in the consideration set. Right? And doesn't build someone's affinity faster and doesn't put them into, doesn't shorten the buying cycle or buying journey. Those are all the things I want to do. But I can only figure that out if it's in the context of how people like to do things and how they understand products and how they buy. That's the hill I'm going to die on, Winston, as a marketer.
And with that, we come to an end. That was good. This was a good conversation. I definitely enjoyed it, Ryan. So if people need to reach you or find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, like I'm there every day. That's also the fastest way to get me. Right. And then my website is contentlift.io. But really, LinkedIn, Ryan Paul Gibson, fastest and easiest way to get me.
All right, awesome, Ryan. Thanks so much for spending time with us, dropping some golden nuggets. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, take care.